everyone. Happy International Education Week 2020. My name is Teresa Gagnon, and I have the privilege of managing the Benjamin A. Gilman International Scholarship Program at the U.S. Department of State. We're excited to celebrate the benefits of international education and exchange worldwide. The State Department has various programs that prepare Americans for a global marketplace and help enable them to become future leaders. Today, Anyssa El-Manfaas, an alumna of the Gilman program, will join us to discuss her experience studying abroad in Japan. The Gilman program is dedicated to making study abroad accessible to all American undergraduates, regardless of financial need. It provides scholarships to talented students receiving federal Pell Grant funding to study or intern abroad. Students can apply twice a year, in January and in August, for awards of up to $5,000. These scholarship funds can be used to pay the costs associated with any credit-bearing study abroad or international internship program run by a college or university, such as a faculty-led program, by a third-party provider, or even a direct exchange. By investing in talented, globally engaged, and diverse Americans, and enabling them to connect with communities around the world, sharing American values and culture, we are directly supporting our broader mission. Hi, so thanks so much for joining us, Anyssa. Could you just tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, I'm happy to be here, Teresa. So I'm talking to you from my dorm here in Washington, D.C. I am a junior at Swarthmore College right now. I'm studying peace and conflict studies, and I am glad to talk with you about my experience with the Gilman Scholarship and the first time that I'd studied abroad, especially because that had come with a lot of emotions, that had come with a lot of nervousness. What do I do studying abroad? And as a first generation college student, how do I navigate the world of studying abroad and looking for finances? So I'm glad to talk with you about that. A little bit more about my person is this is my first time doing college. So no one in my family before has done college, so there's new experiences around every corner. But I will say that studying abroad was one of the most significant impacts, not only to myself, but to my family and for my sister too, because after I had learned how to navigate that process, my little sister also applied and was able to learn about study abroad. So I'm very thrilled to be here and support other people as they're learning how to navigate this crazy world of financial aid, scholarships, and getting themselves where they want to be as far as their academic and personal goals.
No, that's fantastic. It's so great that you've been able to motivate others, even your family, to think about studying abroad, and you're really paving the path. So what drew you to the Gilman program?
Right. So in 2018, I was a community college student at the Community College of Philadelphia, and I wanted to study abroad. So when I saw the flyer at my community college for this awesome program to go to Japan, namely to go to Hiroshima and study nuclear post-recovery, I said to myself, this is where I need to be. So I had applied and I got into the study abroad program. That's great. Yeah, I got the acceptance letter, but what about the bill? What about that bill? So I was receiving financial aid from the state at that time. However, the cost was it was significant. It was significant for me personally. So I said to myself, all right, I'm working a job like any college kid would at like serving tables. I was a waitress at that time, and I need to figure out how I was going to pay for that.
Can you kind of give us some insight into what those discussions were like with your family when you decided to study abroad? Is that something that they were initially supportive of, or kind of how did they view that?
My mom's first reaction was, "What? You're going to Japan?" Yes. I said, "Mom, guess who's going to Hiroshima?" And she turned around and she said, "Anyssa, not now." I said, "Mom, guess who's going to Japan?" And she said, "What? No way, you have to be kidding." So that was really significant for me and also my family and also my little sister and my brother who were there to share that experience with me.
So Anyssa, you get on the plane, you touch down in Japan, and what's that like? What's the experience? I mean, how would you describe it?
Of course, and I can say four emotions were running through my head. I was excited like I was going to jump out of my skin. I was terrified like I was going to jump out of my skin. I missed my mom um, because I love my family, and being away from my family for the first time in a very long time was significant for me. And the other emotion I felt was something's happening. Something is beginning here for me.
Hmm.
I'm taking ownership of my academics, I'm taking ownership of my life experience, and I'm branching out. So I was curious and I was excited. But when I touched down and I arrived in Japan without any prior language experience, I was challenged every day to try to use what little skills I did have in speaking Japanese. And it definitely took me out of my comfort zone. It definitely took me out of my comfort zone.
Yeah. So you mentioned kind of the language barrier, but were there any cultural barriers or things that you didn't necessarily expect? Kind of some anecdotes?
During, I think, the second week of my dorm stay at a Japanese university, I had decided to cook. And in my mind, I'm not going to eat a dinner alone. I want to share a meal with people. So I had invited my dorm mates who were Japanese, and I had invited them to come and share a meal with me. As a guest coming in and cooking, I had put my dorm mates in a position that they had perceived as, oh, we weren't being a good enough host at that time. So what had ended up happening was they ended up cooking and trying to offer a meal in exchange for the meal that I had cooked. But that was a learning moment for me, not only for the Japanese culture, but also taking consideration who I am as both an American and as an Arab American. My
Mhm.
American values, as well as my values at home and my experiences sharing food in my home, which may be perceived differently in other cultural contexts.
It sounds like you had a really deep kind of connection when you were in Japan. Did you meet anyone either through your school, your study abroad experience that you're still in touch with? I mean, kind of what's your lasting connections with Japan that you have now?
We had gone to the World Friendship Center in Hiroshima, and we had stayed for a testimony from an atomic bomb survivor.
Hmm.
And that was one of the most significant experiences of my life. It was significant because I had heard from someone a firsthand account of what it was like on that moment when the bomb was dropped. And as an American, and specifically an American student, when I had learned of that event, I had learned it from textbooks. I had learned it from novels. I had learned it from various films, but I had never heard it from a Japanese national who lived during that time. It inspired me to think more carefully about how I perceive history and the individual element of history and how that shifts and how that's relative. I will always remember that moment for the rest of my life.
Hmm.
And one of the connections that I have from that moment was being invited back to the World Friendship Center to work there
Hmm.
and to translate at the Turkish Oleander Nuclear Summit. And that was probably one of the most impactful moments of my life was applying and receiving the invitation to go to Hiroshima for a professional experience and to continue to build out that sense of allegiance and alliance with Japan and specifically through the World Friendship Center. For me, that had changed and shifted the way that I was looking at my academic interests as well as my personal interests. And that is also the reason why I have changed from physics to peace and conflict studies at this time.
That's great. Are you still keeping your concentration in Japan and that region of the world, or have you explored other languages and other cultures as well as part of your conflict studies?
Absolutely. So I had learned early on that it was pretty difficult for me to learn Japanese.
Hmm.
But what I also learned in investigating how the nuclear summit would go, what the Turkish Nuclear Oleander Conference would be like, I had grown a deeper interest in nuclear deproliferation as well as nuclear material security. So I
Hmm.
said to myself, how can I marry my interests? Okay, I'm interested in nuclear studies. Okay, I'm interested in peace and conflict studies. And I'm also interested in counterterrorism. I started to look into the region of the Balkans, the post-Soviet Caucasus, and the Middle East, that nest right in that area of the world.
Hmm.
So Whereas I had started in Japan, that was a springboard for me to move into the idea of nuclear material studies in the Middle East and Caucasus region. And that's where I continue to specialize now.
Oh, that's really interesting. Have you participated in any other programs or been able to go abroad in that region of the world, or kind of what are you doing as a current in your current academic pursuits?
Yes, I'm excited to talk about that. So I found out that
Great.
because my family speaks Arabic, it's easier for me to learn those languages because the sounds are familiar to me. So I had to learn Turkish, and I had to learn Turkish through the Critical Language Scholarship Program. The Gilman Scholarship was the directory, the alumni support was a huge part of my ability to find the CLS scholarship, apply and effectively succeed in that program because that was an immersive experience that really drew upon all of my problem solving skills that I had formed while I was in Japan for my first immersion. So I carried over those problem solving skills into that context. And I'm happy to say that I'm a second time recipient of the Critical Language Scholarship in Turkish. And I plan to master the language and work towards fluency in that language as I move forward throughout my life.
Kind of reflecting back on your journey, where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Yeah, I guess the saying is true when you look backwards, you have 20/20 eyesight.
Hmm.
And it's amazing to think about how one experience springboarded to another. So, where I see myself now, and considering all the experiences and the privilege of having those experiences, I anticipate and I hope for and I'm working towards a career in the Foreign Service.
Hmm.
So that is where I hope to see myself in a couple of years, and that's where I've been dedicating most of my studies and my linguistic refinement. So I'm still studying Turkish. I will be studying Turkish for many years. There's so many facets of the language that fascinate me, and so many aspects of the culture that attract me. And I would love to continue to dedicate to that region of the world and serve as a foreign service officer to that region.
Oh, that's fantastic. The United States would be very lucky to have you in that role, I'm sure. And any advice that you have for students who are studying at a community college who maybe have never left their region or their state, and it just seems really um, bold to go overseas. I mean, what would you tell that student?
So when I think of one second,
Hmm.
because this is important to me. I know everyone says you can do it, but I know that in that moment when you're looking at the application and you realize that maybe you don't have a liaison in your campus, maybe you don't know how to fill out that application, you've done the webinars, you've looked on YouTube, but you're still stuck and you keep getting that little voice saying, hey, I'm a community college student. I don't know how to do this. Please give yourself that chance and give yourself that opportunity because you are valuable, you are needed, and your perspective is one of the most dynamic in the nation. Community colleges are one of the most diverse environments to learn and to grow as a person. And your perspective is invaluable, especially in um, linguistic and cultural exchange. When the United States and the State Department put together these exchange initiatives, it's to bring out the diversity of our nation, it's to bring out the diversity of our narratives. And your narrative is valuable and your narrative is important. So please remember when you're writing your essays, it doesn't matter what brand name university you go to or whether you come from a certain background or not. What matters is that you're writing that essay as yourself and you're going into that interview as yourself and you go abroad and you say, all right, I can do this. Because when you represent your communities, for example, I came from South Philadelphia, okay? And I grew up in a very small area of the city. No one really studies abroad. People hardly graduate high school sometimes in some cases. You don't picture yourself going abroad. Being able to be overseas and talk about, hey, I know that the American culture has this really robust narrative, but don't forget that there's intersections. Arab American, what does that mean for the American experience? What can I offer when I go overseas? Such as my example when I was cooking and I made an Arab dish and I want to share it with everyone. that has a different context, and maybe that exposed someone to a different culture that they would not have been exposed to. So I'm telling you, please give yourself that option and give yourself that chance, because you can do amazing things. And I believe in your future, and you can reach out to me if you find my email or if you look on the Gilman site. But I'm here to support you, and everyone is here to support you. We are rooting you on.
Thank you so much, Anyssa.
Yes.
Very motivational, inspirational. And I just want to say Anyssa is one of our 2020 Gilman Alumni Ambassadors. She's an official representative of the program, and we're extremely lucky to have her in that position.
Yes, and I will add in, Teresa, if I can, for community college students, this is such an important time in your life to consider widening your aperture to incorporate other cultures as well. That the skills that you will develop overseas are transferable to almost every situation, be it your job, be it your home life, be it interpersonal communication. And in an increasingly complex world, we need to continue to bolster that understanding for other cultures and that sense of stewardship and that sense of grace, essentially, in being a cultural ambassador to your nation. And it's important. And I think that has the skills that I had learned overseas as a Gilman recipient have been applicable in every part of my life. So it's been very helpful, and I know that will be a life-changing experience for you as well.